Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the show. This is your host, Alicia Williams with Insight Authority Media. Today, our special guest is one of the top real estate agents out of Las Vegas, Nevada, Nakia Woodson. Hi, Nakia, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Alicia. How are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm doing okay.
The first time you buy a home can pretty much be one of the scariest, the biggest, most exciting investment that somebody can make in their lifetime. Now, Nakia, with over 11 years' experience as an educator and an advocate for her customers, really makes her the go-to gal of real estate in the Las Vegas market. This also makes her the perfect expert to ask about buying your first home. So let's get right into it. So, Nakia, tell me something. What kind of people do you help, and how do you help them?
I assist anyone that has a real estate need, whether it's a renter just looking for a rental, a buyer looking to purchase their first home, their second home, a vacation home. I assist sellers that want to list their property, and I also assist investors. So anyone that has a need for real estate, I can assist them.
So you're pretty much A to Z.
Correct, yes.
That's great. Okay, and what are some of the things to think about? If I'm buying my first home, what are some of the things I should think about before making that kind of decision?
Now, if you're buying your first home, I do think for some people it's an adjustment. Overall, in my opinion, purchasing a home has more positives than negatives. What I mean by the positives are the tax benefits. You can write off your mortgage interest at the end of the year. You also build equity in your home that you can borrow from. Now, the disadvantage for some people is transitioning from a renter to an owner, because a lot of times when you're renting, you just call your landlord if something breaks. Depending upon how your lease is set up, you may not have to pay for things like water, sewer, and trash. But once you become a homeowner, things are a little bit different. For example, you must carry insurance. I always recommend that my clients have a home warranty in case something needs repair or if something breaks, because, again, you're no longer a renter. You can't call that landlord. And then I would just tell the first-time buyer, just consider the new responsibilities that they will have as an owner. Everything is on them. They're responsible for everything, and they also carry liability. So if someone's injured, for example, on the property, then that now falls on them as a homeowner.
So which is where the insurance would come in?
Right, exactly.
To cover them. Okay, that's really good info. And then, what are some of the more important things to focus on when I'm buying a first home?
I recommend when people are buying their first home, just make sure it's where they want to be. I think location is key. And then a lot of people make that decision for various reasons. Some people want to be close to work. If people have children, they want their kids in a certain school district. If not, people also base it upon transportation and activities. For example, if someone doesn't drive that much or if they carpool, they kind of want to be by a main road. Here in Las Vegas, for example, people that like water, they'll either live by the lake, Desert Shores, Lake Las Vegas. People that like mountain climbing, they'll pick Red Rock. So I just tell people, look at a neighborhood and pick what's best for you based upon your needs and your hobbies.
Okay. And what about schools? Is schools, if I'm, let's just say I'm buying my first home and I'm in my early 20s, I don't have kids yet. Is a good school district something to look for even though I don't have kids?
It really depends. What I recommend for a person or a couple with no children, if they know that, hey, this is going to be their first and last home, which is rare, then I would tell them, yes, plan for all this. But for most people, the way it typically happens, if they're a single person or a couple with no children, they'll usually buy a home, and then as they have a child or two, then they usually upgrade. But if they're that unique individual that says, hey, no, I just want to be here forever, I don't ever want to buy a home again, then yes, I would recommend that they research schools. We do have one school district here, which is Clark County School District. The other option for parents is we have charter schools, and of course we also have private schools.
And a good school district is also good for resale if it's not going to be a home that, I would stay in for the rest of my life, correct?
Correct. Right. I would tell them to look at that also, yes.
Cool. And so now, do I really need a real estate agent? Because if I go on Craigslist, I can pretty much say go for sale by owner, find as many listings as I want, or there's like Zillow.com, Realtor.com. Do I really need a real estate agent to find a home?
My recommendation is yes. What a first-time home buyer should consider first and foremost, and probably the most important, they do not have to pay for the realtor services. That's actually paid for by the seller. So since it's already paid for and it's actually a free service, I strongly recommend that buyers have realtors. A realtor is going to have your best interest at heart. They are going to look out for you. I always explain it to clients like this. A realtor assisting you in a transaction is similar to an attorney assisting you in court. If you had a court case or if someone sued you, you probably wouldn't want to represent yourself. The same thing with real estate, because your realtor is going to guide you. They're going to answer all of your questions. One thing that I also do explain to buyers is that when they're calling that listing agent, you have to understand that listing agent has already established a relationship with the seller. So now if you call that listing agent and they represent you also as the buyer, that's dual representation. And then if an issue comes up in the transaction, to me, in my opinion, that really is a conflict of interest. I mean, it happens every day. Dual representation is not illegal. However, you as the buyer, if an issue comes up, how do you know that that realtor is going to look out for you? So then the question becomes, are you looking at my best interest as the buyer, or are you looking out for the seller? So I always recommend that buyers have their own agent, separate from the sellers, their own representation.
So let me just make sure I understand correctly. So if I'm a first-time home buyer or a home buyer in general, and I want to buy a house that's listed with an agent, or irrelevant if it is or isn't, the seller pays all the fees? I don't?
With the exception, some companies charge a buyer brokerage fee, which my company charges one. They range anywhere from $250 to $700. Now, the buyer does have to pay for that, but that comes out of title and closing, so it's really a small amount. You don't see it. But now the 3% that agents typically earn, the 3% of the selling price, no, the buyer does not pay any of that. The seller does. So just for simple numbers, if we're talking about a $200,000 home, that means the $6,000 that the buyer's agent will receive, yes, that's paid for by the seller. And that's resale as well as new construction. So anywhere you go to purchase a home, the seller pays for that. There is one exception, that if you run across a for sale by owner, in a lot of cases, they will tell you up front, no realtor, or you can have a realtor, but I'm not going to pay your realtor. So now if you run across that situation and the seller tells you up front, I'm not going to pay, that's a rare situation. But typically anything listed on the MLS and any new construction, the buyer doesn't have to pay anything except a small brokerage fee.
And even if it was with a for sale by owner, you would definitely recommend me going with a real estate agent?
Correct, because the realtor has to draft your contract. So that's the first thing. They're going to make sure that there's wording in the documents to protect you. You don't want to rely upon a for sale by owner who's just going to go to some, legal store and get some paper and say, okay, here's a deed. I would always recommend my clients, even if they want to use a for sale by owner, have a realtor. Pay the cost yourself, because at least you're protected. And then I always recommend that they go through a title company. I would never recommend, them drafting documents between themselves.
I agree, definitely. And then what about, is there any, if it's my first time buying a home, is there any financial help out there for somebody like me who's never bought a home before? Sometimes
the cities do have first-time home buyer programs. Sometimes the county does, and then sometimes like the unions, say like the culinary unions. Right now, the city has one, and then the culinary union. So at the time that the person comes to me, then I'll look into those options and see if there's any down payment assistance available.
Okay. And then is okay. What's the difference? I mean, what should I consider when deciding on a real estate agent? Like, what should I be looking for between a good real estate agent and more of a, I don't want to say shady, but maybe lazy, not so much into it kind of real estate agent? Like, what are some key elements I should look for when deciding to choose a real estate agent?
What I always recommend to people is get someone that's personable but firm. And when I say that, just someone, your personality kind of mesh, because, there's different types of personality. And, of course, somebody that's pleasant yet aggressive. So, of course, your realtor should always be nice, always be professional. However, if they're firm or a little bit aggressive, that's good, because when it comes to negotiation, that means that they're going to advocate on your behalf and they're not afraid to advocate for you.
So somebody that listens to me, but also somebody who is willing to negotiate strongly when needed.
Correct. And one other thing I recommend is a realtor that has a resource list, because sometimes things arise. For example, I've had situations where clients thought they were approved, they weren't, and literally at the last second they had to find another mortgage person. I have resources for those. Clients a lot of times don't know which home inspector to pick. I have a list of those that they can go to. And even once they get into their home, if they need a vendor like a gardener, for example, or, someone to fix their appliances or their plumbing, I have a resource list for that as well. So it's one thing I provide is additional customer service. So it's not just, okay, I find you this house, close, buy. I still expect my clients to have a relationship with me and, call me if they need anything else.
Well, that actually just brought me right to my next question, because I was going to ask you what makes you so successful when working with, home buyers or any buyers that you work with. And basically you just answered it. You don't just close the deal and then walk away. You actually hold their hand and be part of their, part of the experience all the way from A to Z and even afterwards.
That's correct. What I do for my clients, mine is customer service and also patience, especially with first-time home buyers. You do have to have patience, because a lot of times they're indecisive, which is expected, because, again, this is their first time purchasing a home. It's the biggest purchase they're going to make in their entire life. So a lot of times it takes first-time home buyers a little bit longer. So my thing is customer service. Just to give you an example, now this wasn't for a buyer, it was just a listing, but just to give you an example, the person was out of state, and literally I did everything A to Z. Whatever had to be done was done. That included going to the post office to order them a mailbox key because they're out of state. That included being at the home waiting for carpet to be installed. There was a situation where they had a tenant and they were evicting the tenant, and I was the person that had to run to the courthouse to do the paperwork. So whatever my clients need me to do, I do. And a lot of times I have to fill in for buyers as well, because most of my buyers work full time. So, of course, if they're at work and then the mortgage person calls and says, I need this or that, if it's something that I can take care of without disturbing them, then I do that, so they can enjoy their time at work and not have to stop every minute to get this document, to do this, to do that. So whatever I can do as a realtor, I do it.
You must get a lot of referrals.
Right, definitely.
I could tell. Somebody who actually goes the extra step and the extra mile, that's really hard to find with people who work on commission and once they close the deal, they're done. So, like if I was going to buy a condo, or let's just say something with a home association, and I wasn't sure what that all entailed, can you give me some details on that?
When you buy a home in a homeowners association, they have rules, and the rules are referred to as CC&Rs. I always recommend that the client read the rules before making a final decision, and that's one of the things that I put in my contract. I put that the seller has to release the CC&Rs to the buyer, and the buyer has 10 days to review it. And at the end of that 10-day period, then the buyer can decide, hey, based upon these CC&Rs, I can't do this. The ones that usually get people or that affect people the most for the CC&Rs are parking. You have some communities which it's silly, like after a certain time, you can't park on the street. So, for example, after 6 p.m., you can't park. For people that entertain a lot, that may be a problem, because if you don't have enough room in your driveway. And so it's like, where are your guests going to park? You have some communities that have limited parking, and a couple of other things that I've run across with clients and it didn't work out for them. They wanted to operate a home-based business, and the HOA had a rule against it, so they opted not to purchase the home. And the last thing, now this is standard in all associations, anytime you want to make a cosmetic change to the outside of your home, you have to get an approval. And this is even, for example, possibly the color of your door, your screen door, your glass, your rock. So when you're living in a community, everything has to be uniform. So I always point the key things out to the client and the CC&Rs, and I tell them, make sure you can live with these rules, because once you close on this house, this is it. You have to follow these rules.
They're your rules too. So now, is there, like, I know that there's like home association fees and stuff like that. Now, is that part of your mortgage, or is that a fee on top of your regular bills? How does that work?
That's a separate bill. So it's not included with your mortgage at all. So whenever a client wants to see a home in the homeowners association, I tell them up front what the monthly fee is, because that's typically disclosed in the MLS. So I tell them, this is your association and this is your monthly fee. Depending upon your community, the monthly fees range anywhere from $35 all the way up to $200. And that's a good question that you asked, because for some people that's a deal breaker too. It's like, no, I have my mortgage, I have to pay taxes, I have to pay insurance, and then I have to pay another $200 for this HOA. So for some people, the HOA is a deal breaker.
Yeah, that doesn't even include your power bill, your gas, your electricity, the basics.
No, the HOA is just an additional expense. Now, in some communities, in my opinion, it's worth it. Again, what I always tell the client is, look what you're getting. Just to give you an example, Rhodes Ranch, the last I checked, their HOA fee was either $120, $140. In my opinion, the reason why that's not bad is look what you're getting. First, you have a guard-gated community, so safety, number one. You don't just have anyone popping up at your door. You set your rules. So if you want them to call you, they can. If you want them to let anyone in, you can. So each individual homeowner has it how they want. But the point is security. I mean, what are you going to spend for a security system? So to me, $120, $140 is not bad. In addition, they have pools, they have tennis courts, they have racquetball, they have a center where like you can have parties, meetings, things like that. And they also have a gym. The last thing they do have inside the community is a restaurant. So you literally could either walk or drive your car to a restaurant. So to me, you figure by the time you were to pay for all that separately, to go play tennis, to have a membership somewhere where you swim, to have a gym membership, and then to get a security system, you're going to pay more than $120 or $140. So I always tell the clients, look at what the amenities they're offering. If you feel it's worth that value, then of course move forward. Now, if you feel, no, it's just too much, it's not worth the value, then by all means, let's look for another community.
So basically, there's some pros and some cons to the homeowners association. Yeah, you got to pay for it, but it does come with some pretty good amenities. You just have to weigh that out and see what best fits your pocket and your lifestyle. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, I know you deal with a lot of new home buyers. And you said that they sometimes have a hard time figuring out what they want or what they like or what they need. Like how many homes would a new home buyer need to see before you would think that they'd be comfortable enough to make a decision?
I personally think 10, but I could go all the way up to 20. I personally think after 20, it's like, okay, what I do is if it gets to that point where it gets to the 20 mark, I always visit with the client and I go, okay, what is it you're specifically looking for, or the past 20 homes that we've seen, what is it you don't like, and then I'll kind of narrow their search.
Yeah, because either they're not communicating something to you, or there's something missing, or maybe they're just not ready to make that kind of decision.
Exactly.
So definitely time to narrow it down. But 10's a good number, so at least they get to see a little bit of everything.
Right.
So now, okay, so let's just say I like a home, I like the neighborhood, I'm okay with the payments, the HOA fees, and everything else. Now that I want this house, what's next? Like how does the process work?
Well, basically, once you tell me, hey, I like this home at 123 Main Street, then my next question to you is, are you ready to submit the contract? If you say yes, I draft the contract for you. Now, let me take a step back. When I initially start working with a buyer, they have to either give me a pre-approval letter from the bank or they have to give me proof of funds. The reason I do that is because what are we looking for? The majority of buyers, of course, get a loan, so they have a pre-approval from a bank. Of course, you do have some cash investors, but the majority of people are loans. So what I tell a client when they come to me is, okay, I need to know what you qualify for. For example, we may be looking at a $200,000 home, but you qualify for $300,000, or vice versa. We might be looking at a $300,000 home, but you only qualify for $200,000. So my first requirement is that they have the pre-approval or proof of funds. Once the client tells me that they want to submit an offer on the home, I draft the offer, I go over the terms with them, and then I attach the proof of funds to the offer or the pre-approval letter. Just so clients out there know, if you don't attach either one of those, they don't take your offer serious because they figure, okay, how are you going to fund this? And if you didn't supply the information that indicates that you have funding, you probably don't have it. And most sellers are not going to wait for you to start that process. So, for example, if you submit an offer and you put in the contract you need 5 days or a week to go to a loan officer, they're like, no, I don't want to tie up my home for a week. And then if you go to your loan officer, you're not approved. So it's standard in the industry that you should be pre-approved before submitting your offer.
Now, can I put in more than one offer on more than one house? Or if I make an offer, I'm stuck with that house?
No, you can put in as many offers as you want. I recommend people do no more than 2 or 3 at a time. If you're working with a good listing agent, you should have an answer in about 2 days. If you're maybe working with a listing agent that doesn't get back to you that soon, and or sometimes you have situations where sellers are out of the state or out of the country, it could take up to a week. So say if you have 3 offers out there and then one comes back, then I immediately come to you and say, hey, we got the offer on 123 Main Street. Do you want to go ahead and put down your earnest money deposit and open escrow, or do you want to wait on the other 2? So at that point, you need to make that decision, because once they accept your offer, they typically give you 2 business days to come up with your earnest money. Earnest money ranges anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. That's taken to the title company, and then escrow is open. And what escrow opening means is they start getting all the paperwork that you're going to have to sign when you close. So basically, you have that $3,000 on hold. So at that point, once your offer is accepted, you need to make a decision. You know, either you're going with this home and you're going to cancel all the other offers you have out there, or you're going to tell this offer, that's okay, I changed my mind, I'm going to wait on the other 2.
Okay, so once an offer is accepted and I'm good with it, what comes next? What's after that?
So once you submit an offer, the seller lets you know they accepted it. You say, okay, we have you get a cashier's check to open escrow. That basically just means taking your cashier's check to a title company. Currently, now the title company is usually suggested by the seller. And, you know, to be fair, you go with their title company. Sometimes the buyer can pick, but usually the way it is now, the seller determines who the title company is. And I tell people, for the most part, the majority of the title companies are the same and the fees are similar. So, you know, unless you just have a strong reason for wanting to go with a particular company, I usually tell them that's something we shouldn't really counter or negotiate. If, you know, whatever title company the seller wants to go to, we should go to that one. Once you open escrow, the next thing is we contact your mortgage person and let them know you've accepted an offer. Escrow is open so they can begin doing their paperwork, the first of which is that they have to order the appraisal. It can take the appraiser up to 10 days to come out. The appraiser has up to 10 days to come out from the day that the lender requests them. So that's the first thing that's done. I always ask the buyers, do they want to do a home inspection? I strongly recommend it. A home inspection to a property is like a mechanic for your car. You wouldn't just go buy a car without having it inspected by a mechanic. So my opinion is you shouldn't get a home unless you get a home inspection. But, of course, it is optional. You know, the buyer can say no. Most buyers say yes. So then the first thing is we schedule your home inspector. They'll usually be there within 2 or 3 days. They come out to the property. They'll tell you if there's anything wrong with the property. Assuming there's nothing wrong, hey, everybody's happy. Now we're still waiting for the appraiser. Now, if there is something wrong at that point, for example, if they, I don't know, came back and said your AC is gone, you're going to have to replace this in 2 or 3 months at a cost of $5,000. Then I'd come to you as a buyer and say, okay, we have a problem. This AC needs to be fixed. I can talk to the seller and see if they will fix it, but if the seller will not, what would you like to do? And the buyer does have an option once the home inspector comes and the appraiser. If anything is wrong with the home, the buyer has the option to cancel, and they get 100% of their earnest money back. So the buyer never has to worry. I always write the contract to include that if there's any issues with the home inspection or any issues with the appraisal and we can't come to an agreement on it, then the buyer has a right to cancel and they have a right to get their money back. And that's one of the reasons to get a realtor, because if you're representing yourself or if you're dealing with a for sale by owner, you don't know to put that in the agreement. And then what if your realtor, because they're looking out for the seller, they neglect to do that? Now you want to cancel, and then now you're going to lose your earnest money because you don't want to go through with the house because something is wrong. So that's one of the reasons I always tell buyers to get a realtor. Once those two processes are done, the home inspection and the appraisal, typically after the appraiser has come out and they've sent their report to the lender, you can typically close in 2 to 3 weeks. So I tell the clients from start to finish, from the day they accept the offer, they're looking at about 45 days. It could be as short as 30 if their lender is pretty fast, but then it could be as long as 60. So I always tell buyers, just to be safe, 45 to 60 days.
And what is a closing? And how I know what to do? I have to go to it, or how does that work? Can you explain that to me?
Closing, another term we use for closing is escrow or title. Closing, the process is, so when you start this process, you took your cashier's check to the title company, they open escrow. The closing is when you go before title, you sit before a notary, and then you sign all your documents. These are all your lender papers. This is your deed. Anything related to the property, you sign it at that time. If you're going to order anything like home insurance, which you should, I always recommend people take care of that through title. So it's done. You have insurance. You don't forget later. And if you're going to get a home warranty, which I recommend that as well, because if something goes wrong with the home, you typically pay a small fee, anywhere from $60 to $75. And then your warranty will fix it. So just for example, let's just say your water heater goes out. Instead of you running to Home Depot or Lowe's and now you have to spend, $600 to $1,000 for a water heater, they come out, you pay them whatever the deductible is, $60, $75, they take care of it. So at closing, you're getting all that paperwork done. You typically go to the title company to do that, but if for whatever reason you happen to be out of town at closing, or if due to your work schedule you can't get to title, because most title companies have their appointments between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., you can get a notary to come out, but it's an additional fee of about $200. So if for any reason you can't go to the title company during business hours, they just get you a notary after hours or on the weekend, but you just have to pay that additional cost of the $200.
Well, that pretty much covers everything from A to Z when buying a home, and the information's extremely valuable, especially for anybody who doesn't have experience, and even people who have bought in homes before.
Right.
The information that you've given is pretty incredible. What is one of the biggest mistakes that you see home buyers make?
I wouldn't really say mistake, but one thing I recommend buyers don't do is don't overextend themselves. I understand it's their first home and they're excited, and what I mean by that is, if you're approved for $300,000, I personally would say stay at $270,000, $280,000 if you can. The reason I say that is of course your payment will be a little bit lower. It gives you some cushion, but then if an emergency came up and money was tight, at least you have a little bit of equity, and if you needed to, you can get equity out of the home. So that's one of the things I do see home buyers do. They overextend themselves, and they don't realize things like, for example, one other thing I noticed that the new buyers do too, they don't realize that they're not going to get a perfect home in perfect condition. I always tell buyers, if you want a perfect home in perfect condition, then do new construction, get a home that's never been lived in. But I always tell buyers, have a little bit of cushion or savings for minor repairs. When you walk into that house, remember, it's a resale. Someone else lived there, and they probably didn't fix everything because they knew it was going to be sold. And these could be minor things, but they add up quickly. Like, for example, I just had a buyer recently. When he moved in, he knew this going in. It was an older home. The seller did fix the majority of the stuff, but just as an example, when he moved, he had to get a new pump for his pool, which cost him about $450. And there were some other little minor things that he had to fix. So, it could be something small like a leak, something with your toilet, but I always tell clients expect a few repairs. For example, most homes do need the gardening taken care of, because sometimes the sellers will slack off. Like, once they have an accepted offer, sometimes they may not get the pool cleaner, sometimes they may not get gardening done. So going in, those maintenance and upkeep things that have been lacking, you as the new buyer have to take care of that.
That's really good info. Okay, if that is, I don't know, maybe a mistake or however you want to frame it, what is some good advice to somebody who's just starting out?
Well, my advice to a person is, when we look at the home, take very good notes. Secondly, listen very closely to your home inspector, because even if it's not something that's going to break the deal, at least you know. So you basically, from your home inspector, you should have a list of everything that's possibly wrong with the home and that would need to be fixed. Going back to the example I just gave, that buyer knew going in he was going to have to get the pool pump, and for him it wasn't an issue. I mean, he priced it out, looked at everything, and said, okay. So I would just recommend that they pay attention to that home inspection list, and if they feel overwhelmed, like it's too much or they just can't afford it, I would recommend that they not do get that home. Maybe look for something that's in a little bit more upkept position. But if they're willing to do those repairs and they have, that extra maybe $1,000, $2,000, and usually typically does not go over $2,000. So I don't mean to scare anyone, but just sometimes there are minor repairs. For example, a lot of times it could be decorative items. Like, I had one buyer, they didn't like the color of the appliances. So for them, it was nothing wrong with the ones there. They just knew going in, I want to change out my appliances. That is one other issue now that I'm thinking about it. Things like a washer and dryer. You go into some sellers' homes, there's no washer and dryer. So going in, okay, hey, I have to pull money out my pocket to get a washer and dryer. So just things like that. If you go into a resale home and you don't have to do anything, I would say you're a very lucky and very blessed buyer. But usually you're going to have to do a couple minor things.
And that's good. And if they're working with you, at least they'll be prepared for it when those things do come up.
Right.
And is there any big misconceptions or myths that people have about buying a home that aren't true?
I personally think the myth is they don't realize the process and how long it takes. For someone that's using a loan, which, as I stated before, the majority of buyers do, again, it typically takes anywhere from 30 to 60 days. If everything were perfect and done on time, which rarely happens, so I'm laughing when I say that, you're looking at 30 days. But for example, the appraiser might have taken 10 days to come out, and then they take another 5 to get their report in. You lost 15 days right there. So then that might push you to 45 days. Or, for example, what if the home inspector or the appraiser comes back and says this needs to be repaired, and then if the seller says, okay, I'm going to repair it, then what has to happen is the seller fixes it, and then that home inspector or appraiser has to come out again and check it. So now you're talking about another week or two, depending upon, what happened. I had a situation where, unfortunately, during the transaction, we literally were 2 weeks away from closing. Oh, my goodness, and the air conditioner gets stolen. Well, of course, the way that works is right, I know. The seller is responsible for the property until the day of close. So, of course, what happened was the seller had to call their insurance company, get the air conditioner installed. So, of course, that delayed the deal a week. So I always tell people to be safe. We're looking at 60 days, but if you get it closed sooner, great. But I never would tell anybody 30, and it takes 45 or 60, and they're looking like, but you said 30. So I always tell people expect up to 60 days.
That's good, because, some people will be like, oh, I'm just going to buy a home and give up their 30-day notice, and then
right,
they
exactly.
have no place to live.
Well, what I typically advise buyers when they're with me to talk to their landlord, put it in writing, and tell them, I am giving a 30-day notice. However, I may need to extend it out one more month depending upon the process. So I do tell them, give the 30-day notice, but let their landlord know I'm buying a home. If there's any hiccups or any flukes, I may need a 2-week extension or a 4-week extension.
That's great. That's good. That's good stuff. How can homeowners find out more about you and how you can help them?
The best way for any client to reach me is through my cell phone, which is 702-318-1244. Again, that's 702-318-1244. They can call or text. I do prefer text. Now, of course, if it's a long question, then of course call. But if it's something quick, I can get to it faster. If it's a text, they can also email if they prefer. And a lot of clients do prefer emails because I reply, they have it in front of them, and then they can refer to it later. My email address is WoodsonNakia@gmail. That's WOO. D as in David, S as in Sam, O, N as in Nancy, N as in Nancy, AKIA @gmail. And then last but not least, they can go to my website, which is my first and last name.com, and that's NakiaWoodson.com.
Great. Nakia, I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to help those first-time home buyers that really need to know the facts before making such a big decision. I certainly appreciate your experience on this subject, and I'm sure you've enlightened many of our listeners. Thanks for listening and being part of the show. This is Alicia Williams with Insight Authority Media.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.